Hi guys, and welcome to Get Your Reviews and this second part of the awesome Luetin video about the Emperor, basically. So it took me a while, guys, but some things happened. So if you wanna know why, just go to my community tab. So I'm doing what I can, guys, to continue what I have started, and we are getting into the meat of things. Just the second part of this analysis is going to, check what Luetin is expanding on about the Emperor. And the more we go further into this, the better it's going to get and the more interesting it's going to get. So we are literally starting from the last place that we left off. So, let's see it. I don't know why Bulgarian came out. I'm not at 100% yet, guys, so just so you know, probably going to be at 100% maybe in the next, I don't know, I hope this week, but yeah, circumstances are not exactly perfect. But without further ado, guys, I really want to get into this analysis. I'm just very passionate about this, as you know, or at least some of you do know, especially when it comes to analyzing anything that is Warhammer, and the Emperor is kind of like my thing. So let's see what Luetin says this time, and I'm going to try to cover at least 20 minutes of the video, and then we're going to continue into the next part. So let's begin. Oh, I don't know why this
only occupy
didn't go.
of 10 alcoves for the thousands that they have brought there.
Sorry guys, just let me make it so you can hear it, and we are going to continue exactly from where we left off, which is in about the 26th minute of the video. So that means, yeah, right around here. So we are going to basically go back a few seconds as well. So now I'm going to add the sound of that so you can hear it. Okay, let's test it first.
The Emperor speculated.
Perfect, so you should be able to hear it. And now let's continue, like for real, with the analysis, guys. And I'm going to keep an eye on the comments in the same time. Hi to Dear Clayton and Dark. Okay, let's begin.
Bargain with the Chaos Gods as a near enough certainty now within the 40k lore, but it's anything but, it's merely implied. The Emperor may have made a deal he later broke with the Chaos Gods, deceiving them and promising something he had no intention of delivering, or he may have promised them something in the form of a terrible unknown sacrifice for humanity. Is entirely unknown, for it's just as plausible that the Emperor not honouring such agreements are in fact what caused the apocalyptic descent of corruption that caused the Horus heresy.
Yeah, I mean, first comment on that, so that part where the Emperor went presumably to talk to Chaos and they struck some kind of a deal, it's interesting. I mean, it's a bit of a mystery to this day, but he's going to explain that. That's kind of like not the most essential thing here, but it's still very interesting because something did happen there that maybe, just maybe, has a very big impact on the future and what actually happened with the Emperor.
This tends to be the view of other perpetuals who are known to the Emperor, Ol P being the most notable, who outright made a point of telling the Emperor that his actions may well be what brings the doom of mankind and that he's just better off staying out of all of it. So this is one possibility, that in attempting to save humanity, the Emperor has in fact forced certain realities to become true, and perhaps entirely unintentionally. This is a very common principle within time, that if you, for example, saw a glimpse of the future, you may feel compelled to try and avoid it, stop something happening by taking actions, but those actions could then inadvertently cause the future you saw, and you'd actually have been better off by doing nothing at all. Except the very fact that you saw the future at all means at that point you probably have already been affected and set on a changed path. This is
yes,
the whole
actually,
issue.
This is yeah, actually, this is very, very Correct. So if you think about it in your own life, guys, even, would you do the same things that you already did? Would you make the choices that you already did if you knew what was going to happen? Sometimes you can think, yes, it's useful to know what's going to happen, but sometimes there's some natural, so to speak, relationships that you can form with certain people, and they will not happen if you knew that that's gonna happen. So, for instance, if you have a friend and you um, let's say you only see him as a friend, she or he, it doesn't matter, but in time you develop this very, very close relationship because you're just very suitable for each other, but you don't realize it. And eventually, some of you, I mean, either you or the other person realizes it, and you actually discover that you had amazing chemistry all this time and you get together. So, in that case, if you knew that this person could become your significant other, you'll be like, no way, you know? So maybe you're going to ruin that in some kind of a way. It's not gonna happen as naturally as it did without any effort from both of your sides. You were just friends, you didn't have any stress about whether or not you have to pick up the other one, you know? So this is just an example from life, but it's just very good point, guys. Just very good point that if you don't know some things, it's actually better for you. But yeah,
Related to time
food
travel
for
and
thought.
cause and effect
Food for
and
thought.
meddling in things and altering the course of stuff. But this is why I
My puppy
continue
is
to
here.
maintain that time is an important factor in the 40k verse. I wish it weren't, but I think it is. Horus being shown a vision of the future, real or not, it affects him in a way that changes his actions. And I'm not going to go off on another time rant here and now, but suffice to say a lot of time travel narratives deal with this issue. Okay, just quickly then.
Okay, guys, chapter 17. I'm just I think I have to pick him up now. Okay, Goldie, 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 Goldie. Oh boy. Ah, okay, Goldie. Hello, Goldie. Hello. So we're talking about the Emperor, Goldie. We are talking about no, no, no. You're not going to eat my lipstick again. No, Goldie, no. Oi, 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 oi. Okay. He's so sweet. Okay, enough, enough. Kissing later when I don't have lipstick. Okay. Okay, continuing, guys.
Now, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but my personal opinion is that it's fairly clearly established by now that the Emperor is far from the all-seeing individual he is perceived to be. He can see into the future, certainly. He is wise and he understands humans better than they know themselves, and he is powerful compared to nearly all others in the galaxy, but he is far from being perfect and neither are his visions and associated plans. He references this heavily when speaking to many of his companions, a prime example being when he's speaking to Custodes Ra in Master of Mankind. Where you stand now, the Emperor said, is the present. Do you see the top of the cliff? Of course, sire, says Ra.
That's very interesting.
That is the future. You see it, you know what it is. Now reach it. Ra hesitated. Now? Climb, Custodian. You question the nature of my foresight. I am granting you an answer. Ra moved to the rock face, looking over the stone, finding his first grips. He tested them, finding them strong, even against the weight of his armor. The weaker ones he avoided. Less than 10 heartbeats had passed when a rock cracked and crumbled in his gauntleted hand. Ra skidded, arresting his fall by clutching at the stone. Another gave way, sending him the last few meters to the rocky ground in a breathy cloud of white dust. You looked for places to safely grip, said the Emperor. Yet you have already stumbled. You did not know the stone was weak. It looked strong. The Emperor smiled, and it was by far the most unpleasant sight Ra had ever witnessed. Emotion painted across a human face, as false as the grotesques at any masquerade. Yes, the Emperor agreed. It did. And you only learned the truth too late. The Emperor then
Goldie,
gives
listen,
Ra
listen.
another example of seeing a distant shore and trying to get across to there. Curiously, while speaking, the Emperor's eyes glaze over as if he's either lived this moment or considered it deeply many times. He tells Ra of all the things that could go wrong during the crossing, eventualities that were unpredictable, from the ship being poorly built to sea monsters devouring the vessel. And the Emperor describes how each passing moment is rich with 100,000 possible pathways.
Okay, let's stop it right here. So, hi Jake, Optic. Hi to you. Oh, yeah. So, about that, this was a very actually smart thing for the Emperor to like show that. So let's hear it again because yeah, there's something to be said here.
Already stumbled. You did not know the stone was weak. It looked strong. The Emperor smiled, and it was by far the most unpleasant sight Ra had ever witnessed. Emotion painted across a human face as false as the grotesques at any masquerade. Yes, the Emperor agreed. It did. And you only learned the truth too late. The Emperor then gives Ra another example of seeing a distant shore and trying to get across to there. Curiously, while speaking, the Emperor's eyes glaze over as if he's either lived this moment or considered it deeply many times. He tells Ra of all the things that could go wrong during the crossing, eventualities that were unpredictable, from the ship being poorly built to sea monsters devouring the vessel. And the Emperor describes how each passing moment is rich with 100,000 possible pathways, minute after minute, possibility upon possibility, path after path, all variables you're unable to see from where you stand at this moment.
Okay, so that basically leads me to believe that the Emperor did not see what happened with Horus coming, but he's also going to address that, so let's not get ahead of myself. It's just that this is very smart writing, in my opinion, in terms of the examples and the door that the writers are leaving for themselves if something in the story or continuity doesn't make much sense, because they can always revert to this moment and say, oh, so yeah, maybe, just maybe, the future is in flux anyway, so, the Emperor could have seen something, but it changed in the last minute, so there's that.
The Emperor reached out as if he could crush the coast in his golden gauntlet. His expression was cold in its pale ferocity. I can see the coast, Ra. I know what awaits me there, but I cannot see all the infinite vicissitudes between here and there. That is foresight, Ra. To know 1,000,000,000,000 possible futures, and to be left to guess at the infinite ways of arriving at each one, to map out even one possible eventuality, taking into account every decision that every living being will make that will impact upon the others around it, would take all the lifetimes I've already lived. The only way to know anything for certain, and he trailed off, gesturing to the distant shore, is to
Okay.
reach the other side.
Okay, so quick note, if you watch the Apple Show Foundation, you will see this guy, Harry Seldon, I think was his name, that basically through mathematics he was able to predict the future, but he's not able to predict an individuality's future. So certain people can do things that he cannot predict. And there's a character there, a girl that is a very smart mathematician. I mean, someone that could really stand next to this Harry guy, and she's also having the ability of prediction unnaturally, so she doesn't actually need to calculate something, and that is superior to the math because she can literally perceive events that are just going to happen, and just like having a hunch as well that something is going to happen, and she just does things on this instinct that basically hints her that she has to do something in a particular moment that leads to another future that Harry could not predict. So it's very interesting. It's just very interesting. If you haven't seen Foundation, I recommend it as a series. It's just getting better and better with each episode.
Said Ra. Now, if you were to believe the Emperor, you come away with the sense that he is unable to see clearly the future, which fits with what we know of 40k, as even the most powerful Eldar seers cannot see the future clearly, as it were. They see more like possibilities, moments in the future, but not necessarily what implicitly happens between then and now. It also, yet again, depends on what sort of time principles you're operating on, and this is where you could splinter off into talking about multiple timelines and so forth. One quick thing to note, multiple timelines does not necessarily mean that every decision possible creates a split into a new timeline, but it may do, or it may not. But truly, this is something for another day. The point is that the Emperor may well be operating on the principle of being a self-fulfilling prophecy, which he regularly fails to note when giving examples of his inability to clearly see how to successfully get from A to B. He sees a potential future vision, but not what occurs in between. through his actions to prepare for said future, he ends up creating the vision he saw, meaning had he not had the future vision, he may not have taken those actions and therefore not created that reality. An example being, maybe if he saw a vision of the future where the galaxy is in flames, burning, worlds being slaughtered, he may consider the need to try and save humanity, yet in so doing, create the very forces which cause the galaxy to be consumed by the fires of war. Now, that's a clumsy example, but it's the basic principle. Now, a self-fulfilling prophecy is a specific type of causal loop, and it need not happen purely from psychic precognition. It could simply occur via access to knowledge or some other gained awareness of the future. It's also worth noting that not all SFPs, self-fulfilling prophecies, are true causal loops. A prediction of something that alters your behavior does not necessarily equate to being a causal loop. That's just normal cause and effect. Like if someone told you that wearing a headband while playing sports ball on the weekend would ensure you to score a goal, and so you wear one and you score a goal, the fact that you did is unrelated. There's no loop because it's just something someone randomly determined. Even if you had ignored the advice, you may well have still scored. These kind of non-looped SFPs can go in both directions, in the sense that if someone said to you, well, if you didn't do something, then X would happen. Well, if it happened as they told you, this is not necessarily suggestive of it being a causal loop. It's just like saying to someone, it's going to rain tomorrow. If you don't take an umbrella, you're going to get wet. Well, that may be true and predictive, but it's not a causal loop. The key thing when it comes to an SFP causal loop is that there needs to be some means by which one entity has access to information beyond our four-dimensional verse, namely a future vision. That vision or extra information that causes actions that would in all reasonable likelihood not have occurred were it not for that vision. It could be also some other information, you find a book from the future or whatever. This is what causes the loop, because without the vision you would not have taken the steps to either attempt to avoid or deliberately create it, and thereby not enable the vision in the first place that caused those actions. This is of course another of my irritations with time stuff, interesting as it is, because it tends to screw everything up. And things like SFPs can often stray into territory like predestination paradoxes, backwards causation. Go watch my Dark Origins series for more on that stuff if you like it. The core underpinning idea though of a self-fulfilling prophecy is not actually just knowledge. As I've said before, what is knowing? SFP causal loops are more about belief than they are about knowledge. So, example, if you had a truly powerful dream of some inexplicable event, like say saving a family member from drowning in a lake that your family regularly visit and swim in, but to which you rarely attended, but the vision is so clear you can't shake off the feeling there's something to it, and later somebody tells you, hey, we're heading up to the lake this weekend, you feel compelled to go, maybe just out of curiosity more than anything. But at the back of your mind, you have this sense within you, this small shred of belief that what you felt was so strong, you feel like it's going to happen. At the lake, some of your family are sitting and standing out on a jetty, you feel more tense than usual because of your dream, then somebody startles you, you spin around knocking the person behind you off, and the surprise causes them to hit their head on the deck as they fall in, quickly they're struggling, and you jump in to save them from drowning. Now, most SFP, because of their nature, for people in our normal world where we don't have psychers running around all over the place, it's extremely unlikely, and if they occurred, very inexplicable. I don't know if I would classify maybe very strong deja vu within that category, but perhaps. Importantly though, in this example, it's not the knowledge of the dream that's important. Like I said, we all have dreams about things that may or may not happen. It's the person who had the dream's unshakable feeling, their belief, that causes them to take an action they ordinarily may not have, and by doing so they end up in a position they otherwise likely would not have been, thereby creating the SFP. As I say, in our everyday reality this kind of thing is not at all commonplace, it's more just a theoretical musing on the nature of such things. But within something like the 40k verse, this stuff becomes far more applicable, especially when you're talking about beings like demons of the warp, aliens, seers, bizarre entities like the Emperor of Mankind. To go any further, we'd have to start talking about closed time loops, backwards causation, eternalism, origins of information, paradoxes, various other philosophical ideas, all very interesting, but not for today. Now, in relation to the Emperor, the most important thing for me is what does this tell us about the Emperor's intentions? Well, most importantly, it tells us that he has likely caused much of what has occurred, directly or indirectly, and it also tells us that he's likely playing a very long game. Although side reference, much like Star Wars, this concept of someone to bring balance to the Force in the sense of, right, but when specifically is that going to occur, feels very similar to the concept of the Emperor saving humanity. Everybody obviously presumes the Emperor was trying to save humanity prior to the Horus heresy. Everybody presumes this was his grand plan, and that he failed. Except, what if it weren't? What if this were all part of his vision still, and that he knew from the beginning he would be interred on the Golden Throne? He knew that in fact the heresy was not the point at which he would save humanity, and that this is all par for the course. I believe there is a very real possibility that this is the case, and that in fact the Emperor's ultimate vision, based on the concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy, may still come to pass. There are though many unknowns still remaining, but there are indicators that the Emperor knew of what was to come. For example, the Golden Throne was prepared from the beginning to accommodate massive amounts of psychers to be sacrificed. So why would the Emperor design and prepare the device to do so, if he had every intention of just leaving into the webway or using Magnus to help with the Golden Throne? Initially, the Golden Throne didn't even require the Emperor to be on it all the time. So why, when initially they set up the Golden Throne and the Sisters of Silence bring a load of psychers to be sacrificed to the Golden Throne, the Sisters note how, even in that first instance, the psychers being sacrificed only occupy one of 10 alcoves for the thousands that they have brought there, meaning potentially it's going to be 10,000 in the future. But the Sister of Silence rationalizes and consoles herself with the fact that this is only going to be necessary for one day. Of course, that's a lie. It was going to happen for the next 10,000 years. So again, why would the Emperor design and prepare the device to do so if this wasn't going to be necessary, if he hadn't foresaw this was going to be the case? Was it just a precaution? Was it future-proofing? Or perhaps the Emperor's vision thousands of years previous was of himself sitting atop a golden throne with thousands of psychers fueling him daily?
Maybe, just maybe, if we are thinking about the previous way that we just discussed, that he just presented, about how there's possible futures, so he could have seen a few in case the worst will be happening. He put this, as a precaution, as an additional measure, because, that makes total sense, if you see a few possible futures, but you don't know how how those futures are going to come to pass. Maybe, maybe he doesn't see the details, so he can see like the end result, but how did it come to that? How did it come to this particular or that other conclusion? He doesn't see that, maybe, but he sees what is going to happen, or a few variants of that, just that the path to that is not very clear, if actually at all. So to make this precaution, yeah, but that still doesn't mean that he knew that this is going to be the future that's going to come to pass. So basically he decided to tie his pants up. That's an expression, just means to take precautions, to make some kind of a safety plan. So that is what I'm thinking here. In order for the Emperor to still not be sure that that was going to come to pass, what happened, but in the same time to put the precautions there if it does happen. So that kind of a way, it makes sense. It doesn't mean that the Emperor must know that all that transpired with Horus and the heresy would be this way. He might have known some of it, but he didn't think that he's going to be actually dead and on the golden throne sustaining it, So basically he was like, okay, there's a chance that I can be in that state, and then I'm going to need those psychers to be sacrificed every single day for me. So yeah, it doesn't have to be one end or the other end of things. It could be somewhere in the middle, and it will make sense, at least to me.
Horus and some of the other traitor Primarchs, Fulgrim, Mortarion, were upon the planet of Dwell. Horus has discovered some of the population had been placed into cryogenic capsules, 1,000 generations, according to Horus. He states to his brothers how everything these people knew is preserved and blended with the hundreds of remembrancers and iterators who came to this world after Guilliman restored it to the Imperium. Horus explains he came to dwell because he had become aware of gaps in his memories, time that he could not account for. And Primarchs have perfect memories. They recall every moment of every second, every day, from the moment they became self-aware, and so to have gaps in their memory was extremely unusual and disturbing. With so much having happened, and the Crusade being taking all of their attention, this was not something Horus had been apparently aware of until now.
Okay, so Dark, you say like Sanguinius saw 4 different futures about himself. Exactly, that's very good example. Thank you, Dark.
But when he heard Robert Guilliman describing the library constructed by the Ultramarines' highest epistolary, that it rivaled the more solistic of Dwell's repository of the dead, he realized he had an opportunity to fill the voids in his memory. So evidently, this world contains the shared memories of remembrancers, iterators, and many thousands of individuals more spanning the last millennia. Fulgrim makes an offhand dismissive comment, but Horus presses him to recall every moment. Does he recall all of his battles? Fulgrim confirms, of course, all of it. So Horus asks him, so what of Molech? To which Fulgrim realizes he too struggles to recall the nature of Molech. This is less an erasure of memory by the Emperor than it is a manipulation. He has likely additionally psychically distorted their memory so that these gaps were not so apparent. He hasn't just purely erased, he's also bothered to try and cover it up. Huge gaps would be too obvious, so this obfuscation is designed to make them less noticeable. In fact, they start to realize the logs of the Crusade state several Primarchs and the Emperor travelled to Molech, and it was a compliant world, no battle, no bloodshed. The populace were meticulous in their record keeping and well-remembered terror, welcomed the Crusaders' unification. So why, Horus wonders, did they remain there, as the ship's logs state, for 111 days, and when they finally left, the Emperor deployed heavy defensive forces, including 3 Titanicus cohorts, Imperial Army regiments, and Astartes Legion detachments. The reason as to why they are there is a mystery, and this is where Horus reveals his discovery. The iterator in stasis they stand around Varfell specialized in the early history of the Emperor himself, the Unification Wars, the myths and legends surrounding the Emperor and how he took the throne of Old Earth. Not only this, but his remembrance is blended with the memories of those on Dwell, some of which go back to presumably before the disturbances of Old Night, that is the Age of Strife. Horus's masterstroke here is that some of those who exist in stasis on Dwell originate from Molech and have memories from the ancient times before the Crusade ever began, before the Astartes or the Primarchs were even created. But most importantly of all, some of these settlers remember the visitation of the Emperor's first expedition to Molech. Horus reveals that the Emperor travelled to the planet of Molech centuries, or most likely millennia prior to the Unification Wars on Earth, and that his ship was left on Molech, meaning he used it only one way, but returned still to Terra. Fulgrim remembers this detail. He says how there were cannibalized ship structures left there. What Horus says next seems something of a leap though. Horus states that whatever the Emperor found there made him into a god, or as near makes no difference. And many people see this as a problematic statement. Horus seems to jump suddenly to making this wild assumption, when one could just presume the Emperor used either the warp or potentially the webway to return to Terra. There's nothing that suggests he suddenly had godlike powers where he could just blink across the galaxy. But similarly, the warp and the webway, these are just also a possibility. There's no real evidence for either of these things. We don't really know what happened. The larger question is about the Dark Gods. Did they give the Emperor power or just knowledge? This is more difficult. What's also worth considering is that as Fulgrim realizes, the power to distort the memories, not just on the Primarchs, but of 3 entire legions of Astartes, and you start to get the sense here that Fulgrim is perhaps for the very first time realizing the true level of power held by the Emperor, and that it is by orders of magnitude far superior to anything the Primarchs wield. Now, this whole discovery leads into questions about just how powerful is and was the Emperor. People often say, well, why didn't the Emperor appear at some earlier point in human history? Why not during the Dark Age of technology and so forth? And the thing is, that's always a possibility, but with caveats related to how much knowledge we have about him, we just don't know. The figure known as Ol P, another perpetual, has shed light on this, as have other perpetuals. From what we are shown through their arguably biased and perhaps misrecalled memories, but either way, they're all we effectively have to go on, the Emperor is seemingly not as powerful as he would later become in these ancient times. Just why he became more powerful remains a mystery. This feeds into speculation as Horus suggests that this trip to Molech is why he became powerful. Now, as I say, this really is quite the split in the audience of the 40k verse around these details, because Horus also tells us how at the dawn of the Great Diaspora, the Emperor travelled here in humble guise and found the gateway to a realm of immortal gods. He offered them things only a god in waiting could offer, and they trusted him. They gave him a measure of their power, and with that power, he wrought the science to unlock the mysteries of creation. This is a very well-known quote in the 40k verse and is often surprisingly still debated now, because despite it having been many years, we still are no really further forward in understanding some of these details. Horus goes on also to explain how the Emperor had no intention of honouring his debt to the gods. He turned on them, taking their gifts, blending them with his genecraft to give birth to demigods, the Primarchs. The Emperor condemns the warp as unnatural, but only so no other dare wield it. The blood of the immaterial realm flows in my veins, it flows in all our veins, for as I am the Emperor's son, you are the sons of Horus, and the secret of our genesis was unlocked upon Molech. The gateway to that power is in Lupercalia, far beneath the mountain rock, sealed away from the light by a jealous god who knew that someday one of his sons would seek to surpass his deeds. And of course this all depends on if you want to just accept Horus's version of events. A diaspora, by the way, is a scattering of ancient people from their homeland. Likely what this is referencing is humanity's first attempts at settling the stars, and what that means is that the Emperor likely travelled to Molech in a non-warp vessel, meaning this is why it was crewed by Perpetuals, as they were the only crew able to live through such a lengthy voyage. We also hear from another ancient Perpetual, Olivia Soraka, who accompanied the Emperor on his long voyage. He leaves her behind to protect the warp portal gateway on Molech, and she describes in a first-hand account how the Emperor emerged changed from the portal. In her eyes, he appeared to have aged at least a century, but what was for her just a moment. Later when...
Okay, so my thoughts on that basically that the Emperor did get more powerful, he did lie to the gods, and he did take a lot of power, so in order for them to give him that much power, I don't know what he promised them, but it was super ridiculous. It was something of a great scale. It was basically like, oh, I'm going to give you my sons and you're going to conquer the galaxy with them. And I cannot even fathom what it could be exactly, because it's going to be stupid from Chaos point of view if the Emperor gave them too much of a promise, because then the Emperor will seem like a total idiot, you know? I don't know, guys. I mean, they would give him a ton of power and he's gonna be like, oh, I'm not gonna use that power that you gave me, like power of a god basically, you know, all the secrets of creation and life. I'm just not gonna do anything with that. So you take everything else, like, maybe that is why you don't know what actually happened there, because it has to be something really, really substantial that's going to make sense from both the point of view of Chaos and the Emperor in order for this to be, you know, well, good. So maybe that's why we don't know. But I wonder what it could be to make Chaos give him so much power, you know? Okay, I mean, continuing.
When Horus goes to Molech, he goes there not for information, not to make a bargain or some clever deal, but for power. He needs to be empowered by the gods. His desire is to be as powerful as the Emperor so that he might defeat him. Some have questioned why did the Emperor in all his power not just seal the warp portal if it was so dangerous? Well, Olivia also considers later how she knew that he couldn't do it. After what he had taken from the realm beyond, it would be suicide for him to draw so near to those whose power he'd stolen. We also don't know precisely who created this portal to the warp realm. Sometimes it's been speculated it was the Old Ones, sometimes speculated even the Necron. Honestly, we don't really know. The description of it being sort of black, irregular, smooth stone, it's pretty vague. Now, the Emperor gaining power here on Molech is likely one of the most controversial aspects of the 40k verse. Like so much of 40k, there remain questions about past issues such as if the Emperor gained power here, how could he have dealt with issues like Catan shards in the past, the Void Dragon. Yet we should also consider, if the Emperor was so powerful, why did he need to travel to Molech in a ship at all? Many seem to presume that he can just blink teleport around wherever he wants to, although there's little to no evidence of this. Then of course there's the famous deal with the Chaos Gods, the information he gained to create the Primarchs. But again, this is extremely vague. Horus is pretty specific about it in manners of speaking, but again, do you want to take his word for it? How much is he inferring? How much is he guessing? Just what was it that the Emperor needed that only the Chaos Gods could provide? By the time we get to the period of unification, the Emperor had the vast resources of scientists and soon the Mechanicum working for him, yet he needed also to go to the Chaos Gods to provide the knowledge for the Primarchs. Somehow this seems unlikely, but again, this is something that is incredibly discussed and raked over so much. Some people speculate that he needed the Chaos Gods to provide souls for his Primarchs. Some people say it was just very complex genetic stuff and so on and so on. But here's really the question. If the Emperor so desperately needed this detail of how to create the Primarchs, why didn't he also bother to get other information that was equally difficult, that would have enabled him to successfully create, say, the Black Carapace, which ended up being incredibly difficult and apparently nearly failed the Astartes project. So why didn't he get that too? Really, here's my final thought on Molech. And note from here, these are obviously my opinions, and primarily I'm of the view that people just get way too caught up on this whole thing. And overall, given the descriptions, even if you wanted to just put Horus's stuff all to one side, it's very difficult for anybody to really say that the Emperor didn't gain something from travelling to Molech and entering the warp. It certainly seems from the various scattered references throughout the heresy later that those beings of the warp feel like they were wronged by the Emperor and they've got an axe to grind. This is not brand new information. What I think people seem to get most twisted up about is the blunt statement of things like the Emperor got his powers from Molech, meaning like he was just an ordinary person and then when he went to Molech he became this super being. It's pretty clear that's not the case. I think, as nearly always is the case with people seeking things to be determined definitively once and for all, they get very tunnel visioned and as a consequence kind of end up missing the point entirely. It's very clear to us that the Emperor was already a powerful psyker before Molech. We know this, there's lots of references, lots of anecdotes, lots of spoken meta character references about it. He likely didn't gain all his power there. But I always think, why could he not simply have become a bit more powerful and also have done a deal? Why is it always spoken of in terms of it has to have been he got all of his powers or a deal? That's what I tend to see a lot. I think in actuality, he probably gained a little of both. But even this is really besides the point. Because the point of it all, regardless of whatever the Emperor needed and came away with, his actions accordingly triggered the Chaos Gods to begin to move against him. I think that's clear, and that, for me, is the critical thing. Because tick-tock. And that, my friends, is the point. It's not about how much power did the Emperor get from Molech. That is mostly irrelevant. It's the fact that he went there at all and came away with some measure of something and triggered a ticking clock. A deadline to where we see the outbreak of war between the Astartes and the Imperium itself to happen ahead of schedule. The clock in the Church of the Lightning Stone, the clock of the eternal gods of darkness, the clock which, as I noted in part 3, is seen not only during the Last Church but also appears in Thousand Suns, where Magnus is given a vision of the future where the galaxy is in flames. Magnus, another example also of a self-fulfilling prophecy. When he comes out of his vision, he has this momentary sliver of sight of the same clock in the Last Church chiming the doom of mankind. And I think it's pretty clear that this is the whole point of the Emperor's story. It's about his hubris, it's about the Emperor in seeking to save humanity from disaster, set himself and the Imperium on course for disaster. He started the clock that would chime the doom of mankind, and when the outbreak of the heresy began amid a collapsing of planned events that Malkador references in First Lord of the Imperium, their time was up.
Yeah, I agree with that. It makes total sense, guys. It really does. He struck the deal. He didn't go through with it at all. He just did whatever he wanted to do. And that went to bite him in the butt. Because he is arrogant. And he thought that he can just outsmart the Chaos Gods without any consequences whatsoever. And he thought that he's going to get away with it. But he obviously did not. So yeah, I also agree with Luetin on that.
So finally we come to First Lord of the Imperium. Now before we go further, there are a few things to clear away immediately. The first is that as an audio short and not a short story, this small but quite important narrative gets overlooked by many. Almost always when I bring it up, most people have not even heard of it, which is very surprising. But just a recommendation from me, listen to more audio shorts put out by Black Library. You never know what you might be missing out on. The second is to reference anybody suggesting that anything that isn't a main novel, i.e. the Heresy series or any other large full-length novel, is not to be taken seriously or as part of the main verse, as it were.
Okay, so First Lord of the Imperium, dear Clayton, if you can, let us record that on Discord so we can search it later on. I have to get my hands on that and read it. So yeah, let us make this a priority.
As far as I can tell, is nonsense and purely the opinion of individuals. As far as I'm concerned, everything that exists in the 40k verse, including the codexes, supplementary material, comics, anything else that's controlled and approved through GW and therefore are all applicable and equally valid because they're all signed off on, they're all part of the same verse. So be it an audio short, a short story, a novella, it's all approved and part of the verse. So, First Lord of the Imperium. The setting of this short is that the heresy has already broken out and it is looking grim and severe for the loyalists. They speak about numbers from Beta Garment coming in, but the actual date is unspecific, remembering the core of the heresy actually took place over an astonishingly short period of time. Malcador is on Terra at the Imperial Palace and has been called to the side of his personal astropath and initially appears to be simply comforting a dying aide. He's reminiscing to comfort and dispel her fears, or is he? This is again what people tend to presume. But in truth, what this feels like is less Malcador putting her mind at ease. That only comes at the end. It seems more that Malcador is offloading some of the things that are of a great burden to him upon the only person he can, a trusted close confidant who is literally about to die and will never reveal his words to anyone. Malcador, for example, reveals in First Lord that he is truly ancient. Malcador states that he is in fact 6,718 years, 241 days old. This means if we are to believe him, and again, in this context we have no reason not to, because why would he choose to randomly invent details just for this dying woman, especially one who already knows likely more about him than any other barring a select few? Why? There's no good reason at all for him to invent details that she actually finds shocking and pretty devastating. It's hardly putting her at ease. So the argument that he's telling her what she needs to hear to feel at peace or whatever, it's nonsense. And based on this assertion of his age, we can speculate that Malcador was born or originated in the early centuries of M24. This is interestingly just prior to the Age of Strife, and to put that in perspective, we currently exist in the time period of 021 M3. The astropath is known as Sybil Nyasta, and she voices a theory that many have speculated, that Malcador is being kept alive by the Emperor's psychic power, that this is what sustains him. Malcador explains no. This is quite wrong, in fact, it's actually backwards. Malcador explains to us that he is the last of his order, the last Sigillite, and more curiously, Malcador explains that the Emperor was not the Emperor until he met Malcador. Before he knew Malcador, the Emperor was, quote, only the greatest of many warlords of old Earth. They knew him by a different name. And this is a detail confirmed by Erda later.
Okay, just want to say that if you watch my previous coverage of anything that is the Emperor, mostly the Last Church, I did say that the Emperor is just like any other warlord. If you just look at his methods, his ways of doing things, his arrogance, all of that, he's just like them. So I think that, of course, he does have the potential more than anyone else, though, in terms of physical and psychic powers, to do a lot more. But in his character, he's just seemed like any other lord. And if Malcador is a perpetual and a very wise guy, let's say, he could unlock potential in the Emperor. I mean, the potential of him in general. So when, let's say, okay, yeah, let's take this for example. Once again, I'm going to give a esoteric example from esoteric science because it just seems like that it makes sense in this case. So based on esoteric science, let's say that if some very special individual is born, that doesn't mean that they automatically will know everything that they're supposed to do in life. They still have to find their path, and sometimes they're with more, I mean, they do have some kind of a awareness of what they're, of what they have to do in life. They have sense for it, they have a knack for it, they have a sixth sense, if I have to be more specific about what they're going to do, but they still have to work through some normal human things. I mean, some ways of thinking that prevents them to, tap into their powers, into that. Basically, if the emperor, let's say, has been brought up by normal parents that have no conception, no concept of anything that's more fantastical than what they're used to, he will probably think on that level for quite a while before he can break away from that and start tapping into his nature. Of course, you can see some individuals in literature in general that they are a lot more aware from a very young age, but you can also see the other. I mean, depending on their fate, on what they have to do in life, some that are special will be born without the awareness. I mean, it's going to be in them, but they're not going to be one with that. Those qualities will not reveal themselves until they go through normal human existence and experience. But with other individuals, that could be the opposite. They will be more aware, and they uh, will still go through some human things, but they're going to look them from the outside, a bit like outsiders, and just do their own thing. I mean, a lot earlier than others. In this case, with the Emperor, it just seemed like he and Malkador are written with this dynamic that the Emperor, although very powerful and all of those things, he lacked like the grand scale of seeing himself as the Emperor and getting all the power for himself, conquering Terra and then the universe, all of those things. And Malkador is a wiser guy that's basically like on a higher level, to an extent. He just took the Emperor under his wing and just show him what he can become, and that's why the Emperor always is going to regard Malkador with utmost respect. I think that although the Emperor is arrogant, he is capable of appreciation, at least of some individuals that were just pivotal in his life and development as the Emperor that we know. So this is just my take on things. We have to continue a bit more, guys, and after that I'm going to go. We're 48 minutes into the stream.
In Saturnine that the Emperor was known by a different name in the ancient times, although the Emperor himself has said as much many times that he had many names. But again, it slightly is working towards corroborating generally what Malkador is saying. Malkador also reveals that the Imperial Aquila is not a symbol purely of the Imperium and the Emperor. He explains that the Emperor has almost pure, focused tunnel vision on his goal, on his ultimate desire for humanity, which of course we know, and that this focus is so strong that he often forgets to look to the mistakes of the past and not recall the lessons learned. Malkador tells us that the Sigillite Order, by contrast, was created to remember human history, to remember humanity, to preserve. Of course, this is referencing the long period of the Age of Strife, and perhaps even before that, as he is the last of his order. It's suggestive that the Sigillite Order has been going on for a very long period of time. Malkador explains that without himself, the reunification of Terra would have been impossible. That's a pretty big statement to make, and he explains that therefore our future is built on its past. Malkador showed the Emperor why all others have fallen, thus allowing him to build on the stability of Malkador's revelations.
Makes
now this
sense.
is actually all pretty vague, and in some respects not particularly helpful beyond us understanding that Malkador has seemingly provided levels of invaluable counsel to the Emperor and enabled him with knowledge and visions that he himself did not hold, or at least in Malkador's mind that's the case. Malkador, even during the heresy, is of the position that the Imperium cannot hold, but reveals that the Imperium was not designed for the post-humans, but for mankind, ordinary humans, not the Astartes and the Primarchs. This has of course been abundantly clear and the premise of the Emperor's plan from the outset. After all, the High Lords of Terror, etc, etc. The Astartes are the tools to protect humanity, but it is humanity itself that ought govern. In practice, that hasn't worked out especially well. And again, High Lords of Terror, Vandyre, the shambles of Ultramar, painfully rectified by Guilliman on his return, the list of human leaders in the Imperium proving themselves hopelessly flawed and easily corruptible is endless. And a small tangent just to note that despite all the pretense of the Emperor and the clarity that his creations existed only so as to achieve brief, immediate goals before being promptly and bloodily consigned to history, all in all this has proven to be something of a bizarre miscalculation now 10 millennia down the line. The Emperor also does not seem to view the Primarchs as his loyal and loving sons, but as objects, things, tools to achieve a task and then be discarded. There's likely a reason why each of them was so specifically different and had very different traits and characteristics. It's because they're there to fulfill a specific role and then be thrown away, just as he did when he slaughtered the Thunder Warriors.
Okay, that's a very good point here. So let me just write it down as a future topic actually. So basically, it's gonna be a bit hard to write. What will happen? I mean, what would have happened? Yeah, what would have have happened? Just the mic is in the way, guys. Happened. Damn it. If the Primarchs have have served their purpose. Okay, so basically what would have happened if the Primarchs have served their purpose, which means that if the Horus Heresy didn't happen and they did serve their purpose, will they be discarded like the Thunder Warriors? Good question. Good topic. I mean, I can do a video about that, so count it as a future video topic. I would, I mean, it's gonna be awesome to pick our brains for that. Okay, continuing just a bit more.
In fact, with regularity, the Emperor refers to his Primarchs as it, and only calls them son if they are in his direct presence or he has need to speak to them in such a manner. Otherwise, he refers to them in extremely disconnected, cold, emotionless terms. Now again, some speculate this is just part of the Emperor's grand misdirections.
Okay, well, if someone, if some of you guys know when, where, and what novel, book the Emperor referred to to his Primarchs as it, I must know where the heck is that. You know, I have to know. So please let me know if you know.
But I can't think for the life of me why it would be necessary, because usually when he refers to them as being less than human, he's speaking with close aides, people he can theoretically trust, so that seems to undermine such ideas. Also, Guilliman, when speaking with the Emperor in M41, reveals to us that the Emperor seemed different, cold, not as he remembered, not at all like a father. This is likely because the Emperor, so drained from 10,000 years on the Golden Throne, no longer has the ability, the power to maintain his illusions, and it's why Guilliman walks away deeply troubled, having now seen the truth of things, and again as others have captured glimpses of before. Quite simply, the Astartes were never meant to exist for 10,000 years. The fact that they have no restrained lifespan is not because they were designed to outsit eternity, not because they were supposed to shepherd humanity. It was simply easier for the Emperor and Malkador to create warriors with no lifespan because of the nature of what they had to achieve in the Crusade. Crossing the galaxy was no task that could be achieved in ordinary human lifespans, warp travel or not. This simple fact ended up creating the oddity that is the Imperium of mankind. It's really a freakish creation. It's not by design, but happenstance. The Imperium of mankind was never meant to exist as it does in M41. Malcador says quite clearly in this story that he can see Sybil is not afraid to die, so he is not at all reassuring her with the information that he will impart. She is in actuality terrified that the Imperium will fail and that too many errors and mistakes have occurred already, plus Horus is closing in on Terra, the doom of all beckons. But Malcador appears unshaken. He tells her, "Believe me when I say this, Sybil Nyasta. This was always intended to be the final act of the crusade. We wanted the Primarchs to turn against one another, against their father. Be assured, we maneuvered each of them from the moment of their rediscovery, pitting them against one another, stoking their brotherly rivalries with his unequal favour. It was not difficult, no more so than positioning pieces on a Cheops board," which is curiously a chess variant played in the June verse. Malcador also notes that those who could not be managed, well, they would never reach the end game. This is possibly suggestive of the missing Primarchs erased from all records, but it could also be referencing traitor Primarchs. Malcador says, "You fear that the Emperor cannot control his sons, and yet I tell you that this war is the method of that control. The Primarchs have no more free will than we gave them."
Wow.
Sybil answers, "Can it be true?" And Malcador...
Okay, that's just pretty direct. I mean, it does mean that the Emperor wanted for this to happen, so to a point he did try to set a future that he foresaw in motion. It just that blew up in his face and the outcome wasn't what he was expecting, but that doesn't mean that he didn't start things in, I mean, he didn't put things in motion. So this is not contradictory to what we talked until now. It actually does show that, yes, he can perceive the future, but yes, also the future is not set in stone. It's in flux, and he can perceive a lot of possible futures. So he tries to do whatever he can to get to the future that he wants to get to, but he's not seeing all the necessary steps that he needs to take. Necessary in a great detail. He could see maybe a part of that. He can have a logical ideas of how he's going to get there, but that doesn't mean that what he does as steps towards that end goal, towards that future that he wants to live through, that doesn't mean that his actions are going to lead to that point and to success in general. It could mean that he will make a mistake somewhere along the line, which actually is going to branch him out, or just like boop, in another direction, which actually happened. But this is extremely telling, the story. So once again, really want to read it. If it's in an audio book form, it's going to be amazing, because it's actually extremely telling. So if, I mean, like imagine you and imagine you. I mean, guys, imagine you're a 40k fan. You want to know everything possible about the Emperor and why the heresy happened and all of those things. And you miss this novel that explicitly states facts. I mean, things that are correct. They're coming from Malcador's mouth. We don't have any reason to doubt that at all, based on, all the principles of writing that Luetin explained in the beginning of the video, from which perspective a story is written, from the perspective of some that, a person that narrates the story, of a character that we can trust and their perceptions, knowing how the character is in general in terms of his character abilities and setting that he is put, he's put in. So everything matters, guys. Everything matters. That's what I'm gonna say. And yeah, we are going to stop here. So this is 1 hour, 1 minute, and 8 seconds. Dear Clayton, if you can, map that. So it's going to be a lot easier for me in the timestamps. I mean, a lot easier for me to just go from here and not have to seek the stream, so I can see where I was. So if you can, map that in time, in the timestamps, it will be good. And also, when did I comment it? That's gonna help a lot. So thank you in advance, dear Clayton. Of course, when you have time. Till that, Conrad curse. Thank you, dear Clayton. Thank you. Okay, so we have about 36, yes, 36 minutes left. So we are, I mean, we went through most of it, but we still have actually a lot more things that are extremely interesting. So we did get into the meat of things, and next time we're going to continue the meat of things. I have more 40k stuff to do. I hope that I can get through as much as possible this week, guys. Uh, there's a lot of things actually that I want to cover in terms of Warhammer, so I'm excited. I hope that I can get everything done this week. I don't want to like overwork myself this week based on everything that happened in the past week, but still I also need, like, innerly, I need to get back to whatever I love to do, so I'm going to do my best, guys. With that being said, please check the links down below to my OnlyFans, where I do my meaningful sex educational content, fitness, health, nutrition, everything that I can help you with to better yourself and literally change your life in terms of your personal growth and relationships, everything that you need. Basically, I'm a coach of that and for that, so keep that in mind, guys. And you can always become a member of the channel and get awesome badges to use in the chat, like my Primarchs, Dear Clyton and Dear Ivy. And of course, if you decide to get the Primarch version of the membership, I'm going to be calling you a Primarch. So that's literally how things are. You get an Astarte, I'm calling you Astarte. You get a Custody, I'm calling you a Custody. So have that also in mind. And of course, my Discord, where we just talk about everything Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k. So with that being said, guys, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. Share if you really want to help me. Don't forget to like and comment, because that's just super important for YouTube. And till tomorrow, guys. Hopefully everything's fine. So till tomorrow. Love ya.